thought this one was obvious, but there are people that have missed it. Allow me to condescend and spell this out. Historically speaking, whatever weight class is your main event. So if you're going to do, oh boy, in this case, you're going to do a Jon Jones fight. That's going to be your main event. The weight class of your main event is heavyweight. Oh, everybody understands the vernacular here? Historically, when you have the heavyweights in your main event, what you'll do is somewhere on your main card, not just on the card, it's on your main card, you'll put another heavyweight match. Now, there's certain mechanisms within the UFC that activate if you're on the main card. So your match will be built, it will be hyped, as they say, it will be promoted. The audience will know it's there, they'll know that you're coming to town. Reason being, if something happens in the main event and we lose it, we can grab one of those guys that's already there, already licensed, already trained, and already promised to the crowd, and we could pull him up to the main event. It's great. And most of you that are at home going, Chael, you just stated the obvious. Yeah, I might have, but we started doing this in 1993. And Dana White specifically started doing this in 2001. We didn't start the policy that I just laid out for you until 2007. So, I mean, it's like anything in the sport that's obvious and you know it as soon as somebody tells you. It's one of those things. So I bring that to you because I think we've got a little bit of a standoff right now. One thing Belal Muhammad is going to do, besides whip everybody's ass, one thing Belal is going to do is he is going to stand up for himself. Now, you've got a guy named Rakhmonov. Rakhmonov had Joe Rogan say to the world a suggestion that his next fight be for a world title. Wildly helpful, not to mention Rakhmonov represents a demographic that nobody else represents. Not to mention he's batting a perfect 16-0. I don't think Rakhmonov good title fight. Everything that I just said is true. I don't think he's main event of a pay-per-view right now. Okay. Belal is, but I think Colby's getting the shot. So now you come to a question of what is Gilbert Burns' motivation as he goes in there with Masvidal, right? And one thing we've seen about Gilbert Burns is his willingness to do things that other people don't want to do. And therefore, his reward is he gets continued to be asked to do things that other people continue to say that they don't want to do. We're now seeing that with Belal. I think that's awesome. I like guys like that. But I also think that we're in a little bit... Chuck Kearney, my college coaches call me. Probably talk about the NCAAs. I'm close to taking that call on speaker. You guys would love Chuck Kearney. Here's the deal, okay? Who's Chuck, by the way, known Colby his whole life. Here's the deal. If Rakhmonov is going to fight Belal Muhammad, great. Put it on the same card as you're doing Leon and you're doing Colby in case something happens so you can pull somebody up. The other solution that you could have is that Belal could campaign to be the backup fighter. Now, you don't start campaigning to be the backup fighter until it's a done signed contract for who the number one contender is. Right now, there is a fight going on in the media. Colby happens to understand this. He's one of the few guys that does. But Belal happens to understand this. He's one of the few guys who does. If Colby gets the nod, Belal could go into backup position, or he could attempt to fight Rakhmonov that night. Now, I just want you to mull that over. Because there's a big risk there, isn't it? And you would think that Rakhmonov versus Belal would be a number one contenders match. You would think that. But before you heard it was going to happen, you would have thought that Gilbert versus Masvidal was a number one contenders match, particularly if it goes Gilbert's way. So you see where it gets interesting? You see where, from a bureaucracy standpoint, this and this alone is what stops a promoter from identifying to us, the audience, what a number one contenders match is prior to it happening. Like, I would love that. I'd be into that. That'd be high. Like, we're going to put a belt on this. We're going to put a BMF on this. We're going to put an interim on this. We're going to put a tag team on this. However you want to do it, we're going to put a number one contenders on it. That's interesting to me, but we can't do it. We can't do it, and we don't do it very often, but this is why. The right 70-pound match for all of them that have been announced to be your number one contender is clearly Gilbert Burns versus Masvidal. And we even understand the caveat. You don't even have to say, you don't have to tell us the asterisk. We follow the sport long enough. We understand that's not necessarily true, particularly for Masvidal. But we say it anyway in case it goes Gilbert's way. We now can't do that because now you can't make other fights. Why does Belal want to fight Rakhmonov if it's not number one contendership? Sounds like a lot of work. Sounds like a really big risk. I mean, do you see the things that have to come into play here? So you have to start to navigate this. And you don't ever look at something as though you lost. And yes, I stole this from Terry Brands, but you don't ever look at something like you lost. You go and get the next best thing. So if you want the world title fight, and Belal does, and he is fighting right now, Covington and Muhammad are in a fight. Believe me, and it's getting dirty. It's exactly the way it should be. There's going to be a lot of blood spilled, but one of them's going to come out. The other one now has to ask himself, what's the next best thing? Go into a backup position. Very precarious. A lot of hard work, not the same money, but we're starting to see, and Colby is an example, it does tend to lend to some pretty good opportunity. Or you get on the very card that night. You deal with someone you're going to have to deal with. Belal is going to have to deal with Rakhmonov, and vice versa. I don't have a lot to offer you, boys. I ain't got a lot of good news. But you do have a choice. Do you want to deal with him down the road for 25 minutes? Or do you want to deal with him now for 15?